Good evening.
Welcome to Talking Who.
Welcome to episode 7.
7, yes.
Week 7.
Yes. Find out what happened after last week's cliffhanger.
Indeed. And just to say straight away, for all those in North America and Australia, we have moved the Almost People review to the very end of the show.
Beginning of the show, when we're going to be talking about the Mannequin Mania DVD box set and other Doctor Who news. And then you can quickly turn off as soon as we start talking
if you want
the
to.
Almost People, if you want to avoid spoilers.
Unless, of course, you've watched it in ways that you're not supposed to have watched it, which is quite obviously possible as well.
But not something we're going to discuss.
No, so anyway, welcome. And, wow, so it's been a big week, but let's just get off.
Well, it's always a big week for
It's always a
Doctor Who
big.
fans.
Let's just get off with our... with the usual social networks and
Yes,
how
as
to
you can
contact
see,
us, because obviously it's an interactive show.
Are my Twitter details.
So tweet us at Talking Who. We've got an iPad right here in front of us to read out your tweets.
We're also on the message boards in
Ustream
and Ustream.
Indeed, yeah. So say hello there as well, and say hello to some of the other fans watching.
Yeah.
And make some new friends in the YouTube chat room. Subscribe to us, YouTube/Those Videos Guys TV. Facebook.com Those Video Guys, Twitter @Those Video Guys, and our website thosevideoguys.tv. So, well, without much ado, let's go on to our DVD reviews.
Okay, yes, and this week we're looking at Mannequin Mania.
Mannequin Mania, yes. The first, well, actually, Spearhead from Space, of course, is...
It's actually a re-release. I mean, this is a bit
re-release.
controversial for certain Doctor Who
it's a
fans.
special edition.
If you've already bought Spearhead from Space, you ended up having to re-buy it,
whether you'd like to or not, because
in order to get Terror of the Autons.
Indeed. Very clever marketing, perhaps.
Well, I have to say though, I think it's well worth it. I have to say, of all the reissues, all these special editions, this is the best one yet that they've done.
Okay, well, let's look at the coming soon trailer. Yeah.
Yes.
What is a Nestine?
A Nestine is a ruthlessly aggressive, intelligent alien life form. The Nestines can put life into anything made of plastic.
Creatures made of the legend. Destroy. Total destruction.
I came to warn you. An old acquaintance has arrived on this planet.
Who the heck are you? I am usually referred to as the Master.
Death is always more frightening when it strikes invisibly.
Can these mannequins actually move?
We shall activate them all tonight.
A wave of sudden deaths all over the home counties. Cause? Asphyxiation, heart failure, shock. Doctor, Miss Grant, get down, man.
Excuse me, officer, could I see your warrant card?
Get out there, all of you! Keep your shoulders back! Bullets can't stop them!
Time has come for our final move.
They're Autons!
Good there.
Oh yes, indeed. Well, Spearhead from Space. I mean, Spearhead from Space is obviously
It's the first Jon Pertwee story.
the first Jon Pertwee story, but yeah, it's it also is the first, obviously, new of the colour era of Doctor Who.
Well, it's actually a whole real change I felt for Doctor Who in that, although I might get some criticism for saying this, before this point, Doctor Who was very much a kids show that adults could enjoy as well, and I felt this was the point really, which was accelerated even more when Philip Hinchcliffe joined the show. But this was when Jon Pertwee and Barry Letts took over. There was this thing of making the show really much more of an older show, appealing to an older audience. Maybe a sign of the show growing up with the audience that had been watching it. But what was interesting was at this point, Doctor Who was just about to be cancelled.
Yes,
and this was like the last throw of the dice, and they did this whole change to the series. It came back in colour. Suddenly the Doctor, now the other big shift is the Doctor has always been, for the past 6 years, travelling in time, going to distant planets, different eras, and suddenly he's trapped in the 20th century
with the Brigadier,
and this made the show huge. I mean, this was when the show really took off. It became really hugely popular.
The whole unit storyline of the Doctor becoming the scientific advisor gives the show a whole different feel. I think from any of the other eras of Doctor Who, previously and in the and following it as well. And it's it kind of makes the Jon Pertwee era kind of special, I think.
Well, this one I find really interesting. In that it really got Robert Holmes. It's actually Robert Holmes had written 2 previous stories for the show.
Yes.
The Crotons and the Space Pirates, which are basically 2 terrible stories. But luckily he got on very, very well with the script editor Terence Dix. And he brought him in to write Spearhead from Space, and suddenly it's from this point on everything. Robert Holmes was probably the best writer, and I'd still actually say to this day, I think he's even better than Moffat. I think Robert Holmes was the best writer the show ever had. Talons of Weng Chiang,
indeed, yes, that's my favourite. Yeah, many
of the show's greatest stories were written by him. Deadly Assassin, he came up with the name Gallifrey. It was him who came up with the whole idea, this backstory for regenerations, and they could only regenerate 13 times. And
he got it. He got
and he really created a lot of the lore for the show. And this is like his first real proper Robert Holmes type story. And it's also Robert Holmes used to like to scare the kids. He really liked to send you behind the sofa. And in this one, you've got a hugely iconic sequence in the show in which mannequins come alive in a shop window and start attacking people and taking over the world and Ealing Broadway.
We've got a clip of it's not actually from the shop, but it's the Auton attacking.
Mrs. Seeley! Get a platoon out here, fast! Recall.
Now, Derek Sherwin, he was the producer of this story, and this was the last story he produced before handing over to Barry Letts. And he had been producing Patrick Troughton's last 2 years.
Yes.
And he had actually been trying, and it had taken him a while to get it more realistic. And he actually introduced a unit in the Web of Fear and Invasion. And then with this story, and you can just see a sequence like that, that's what he's trying to get. This suddenly the horror is there at home, and it's actually the Autons was really kind of like
it's a great invention, really.
Faceless, plastic creatures. There's a very high-powered sci-fi concept behind it. There's this alien intelligence, the Nestine, who live so many billions of light years away. They just send their consciousness in meteorites to Earth, and then have plastic bodies created for them here. And it was actually such an iconic moment that when the store dummies came alive, Russell T Davies reused it in the very first story, Doctor Who story he produced when reintroducing the series.
Indeed, yes. Way back in 2005.
Yes, in the story Rose.
The Autons. Which means the Autons really are... they've been used for a lot of firsts. The first Jon Pertwee story.
First colour story.
First Liz Shaw.
Story.
First Master story.
First Joe Grant story.
First Christopher Eccleston. First Rose story.
First Russell T Davies, And I'd actually say now, with their appearance in Pandoric, it's kind of like, you have to say, people can actually start tweeting this and coming out with their comments on this. That'd be interesting to open this debate. It always used to be the #1 Doctor Who monster, of course, is the Daleks, and then the Cybermen. No argument on first and second place.
Yes.
But there used to be with classic Doctor Who, and I know you hate me saying that, using that phrase for it, but it used to be with classic Doctor Who, the argument in third place, was it the Ice Warriors or was it the Sontarans? Now, I think we can definitely say the Sontarans are now in third place in the new series. They've been very firmly established.
Indeed.
But I'd actually say the Ice Warriors are falling a few places back with the Autons and the Silurians.
Yes, of course.
Because
The Silurians have come back in a big way.
classic stories, and now they've been those two alien. Well, Silurians aren't even aliens; they're like an animal from our own world.
Yes. Yeah.
Silurians and Autons very much being re-established, and you could even say the Ice Warriors could soon be overtaken by the Weeping Angels.
Yeah, the Ice Warriors. It's a shame that they can't figure out a way to bring them back.
I'd love to see the Ice Warriors, because the great thing about the Ice Warriors is they're a bit like, say, Klingons on Star Trek, in that they're a race that's neither good or evil. There's some good Ice Warriors, there's some evil Ice Warriors,
Yeah.
So it makes them a bit more of an interesting race.
They could easily explain, by
I'm sure they would change
by just saying that they just wore gloves or something.
It obviously was part of their armour, but if they could get rid of the Silurians' third eye, which I was a bit disappointed by, they could get rid of the stupid, non-functional hands of the Ice Warriors.
I mean, how did they ever pull the trigger with those hands?
I'd like to see the Mara back as well.
Well, see, Mara's more sort of psychological or something.
Perfect.
But
anyway, getting back to the Spearhead from space.
One thing I also want to mention about Spearhead from space is you kind of, because she only did like about 4 stories.
Yes.
You forget what a great character Liz Shaw is.
Well, Liz Shaw was actually the first, I think, real attempt to do a companion who
modern
was
woman.
not just a modern woman, but a companion who was on the Doctor's level.
Yes.
Who's an equal to the Doctor. And it's not, I don't think it didn't work. I think it worked great, but apparently Jon Pertwee hated it. He didn't like it, so he had no problems with, there was no problems with Caroline John, who played the role, but Jon Pertwee and Barry Letts hated the idea, and they felt they
of an intelligent woman.
They actually felt you needed, it was not so much a woman, but they felt you needed a companion who was stupid
to ask questions
and would just constantly ask the Doctor questions.
But that surely that's just in the right. I mean, there's probably something they could have worked out in the writing, because
if you look in the writing,
obviously
with Sarah Jane Smith or with Ace and Tegan, some very good examples of strong women, strong characters, believable characters, who could still ask the Doctor questions but never came across as stupid. Whereas you got Jo Grant came along, and I know she's very popular with certain fans, but I hated her as a companion because she was such a dimwit. I think people should watch Spearhead. Just also get into Liz Shaw, because she gets forgotten about, I think, in the sort of lists of some of the more interesting companions. Well, the interesting thing, to just put it in perspective on this story, was that coming to the end of Patrick Troughton's run on Doctor Who, and also the BBC was finishing off doing black and white shows based in the 70s, started in the 70s, they wanted to go entirely over onto colour, and Doctor Who, basically its ratings had gone down to nearly 3 million, and they were actually looking at pulling the plug on the show. When Patrick Troughton said, I want to quit, there was a point when they said, fine, we're going to finish off Doctor Who, and they were looking at a new science fiction show to replace it. And there was a Terry Nation who created the Daleks. He wrote a pilot called Never Come the Night. And the other thing that they worked on was they wanted to do a Quatermass series.
Yes.
But Nigel Neal wouldn't give them, who created Quatermass, wouldn't give them the rights. And I think watching this, it was basically what happened was they couldn't find anything to replace Doctor Who. And the BBC were all set to cancel it, and they said, oh, we've got nothing to replace it, give us 1 more year of it. And suddenly that year with Jon Pertwee was so successful, and it gave it a whole new lease of life.
And obviously introducing UNIT as regular characters meant you have action scenes as well. It's like gunfire.
But the thing is, I think with this, if you watch this is very much, you could really see, with just a few tweaks, this could have been a Quatermass story.
Oh no, absolutely, yeah, no, definitely. But the other thing to mention about Spearhead from Space is just how gorgeous it looks.
This is actually, out of all the original series Doctor Who's, this is the best looking.
It looks so good.
What happened at the time was there was a strike at the BBC, so they couldn't do any sets
in studios.
So the show was shot and edited entirely on film, and it's the only time that's ever been done with a Doctor Who story. And it looks amazing, and it looked good on its original DVD. And if you bought the original Spearhead from Space when it came out, and you were like going, oh, I don't want to get this set because I've already got Spearhead from Space, get it. The extras are fantastic, but it looks amazing.
And I think what's missing actually from the extras is that they could have edited a movie version of this together.
Yes,
because it looks like a film. It looks like a movie.
It looks like some, and because it's all done on location, there's no sets used. Because it's all done on location, it actually looks like a Hammer horror movie of the time.
It does, yeah, absolutely.
Does. The only criticism I can come out with it is because it was all shot on location. Some of the sound is a bit wonky. There's kind of like an echo effect on certain scenes.
Yeah.
But I've really got to say, the story, the script's first rate, the acting's first rate. There's often this thing about a doctor can't, an actor has to spend some time getting into the role of Doctor Who. Jon Pertwee, by about the 3rd episode, is absolutely, he's nailed it as the character. The Nestines and the Autons are a fantastic alien, a fantastic adversary. This really is a classic story. If I had to come out with a criticism, aside from there's some problems with the sound, at the very end, when he confronts the Nestine in its new form, it's a bit Ed Wood.
It's a bit hokey, that alien, yeah.
Somebody has just corrected me in the message board that the Paul McGann movie was shot on film as well, and indeed the Paul McGann movie was shot on film, but it was edited on video.
Yeah, and
which was very common practice in the 90s, which is a shame because, if they hadn't edited it on video, you could release a Paul McGann version on Blu-ray and it would look amazing, but you can't actually do that.
Other comments. Barry Aldrich, hello. He's just saying that he wishes he was here with us, but we'll definitely bring Barry back again. And Lisa Gifford once says, did Sean just say he hated Joe Grant?
I'm afraid I didn't like Joe Grant. I mean, she was just this constant whiner, and she was constantly screaming her head off at the monsters, and I just felt that she was a complete wet, and she really got on my nerves. And I think Mel is the only one I like. Yes.
Draculasaurus 13. Does the new Spearhead look better than the original release?
So much. Yeah. It looks amazing.
It's definitely worth the
and
investment.
I think the restoration team have done an amazing job, and it is of all the Doctor Who DVDs available, and I actually would include the new series stuff as well, with the exception of stuff that's on Blu-ray. This is the best looking of all the DVDs.
And T Chalky asks, so does that mean they could in theory do Spearhead on Blu-ray?
You want to know something? The restoration team have been asked about this in message boards, and they've kind of like dodged that question. Theoretically, I was actually surprised it wasn't released on Blu-ray.
If they've got access to the original negatives it was filmed on,
got the original negatives. It was
then yes, theoretically it could be. Although of course it's not 16:9.
Yeah.
So they'd actually have to pillar box it.
But they did that with the Prisoner releases. They did that with the Space 1999 and the Star Trek releases. So I'd love to see it on Blu-ray.
Okay, so then we have.
So somebody's actually come in. Lisa Gifford, she's not very happy with me not liking, but I will agree with you. I hated Rose Tyler as well.
Rose Tyler's awful.
Yeah.
Okay, so that brings us to the second half of the Mannequin Mania. Terror of the Autons. And of course, here we are establishing
whole unit families now. Yes, there they are, and the Master.
The very first Master story. Wow!
Roger Delgado, for my money, the only Master.
Well, of course,
I don't know. I like Peter Pratt in The Deadly Assassin as well.
People do think of Roger Delgado when they think of the Master.
He's the only Master for me. He was amazing in the role, and I love the way. I love that kind of villain. I always think that gives it a bit of extra colour when you've got the villain actually has a friendship with the hero.
Yes.
And a connection. And I always got the impression with Roger Delgado's The Master that deep down he liked the Doctor, wished they could still be friends, and he almost had this very politeness to him where he'd be like, almost like he'd have this attitude of, Doctor, why are you opposing me? That's very silly of you. Really,
well, I do know that Lisa Gifford won in the chat room. Her theory is that she thinks back on Gallifrey they used to be quite an item.
Well, originally there was an idea that the Master and the Doctor were going to be brothers.
Yeah, but that was
one thing which
never happened.
Around for a long time.
Yeah,
and
it's a bit too late to introduce now. But
I don't know if I will get into trouble for saying this, but I thought Anthony Ainley, I was never much of a fan of his interpretation of the Master.
Oh, really?
I felt he was just too comic book villain. You know, he was like, ha ha ha, I'm the master and I'm evil, and he got on my nerves.
So, Terror of the Autons as a story, what did you think?
It's one of my favourites. It's one of my It's just like everything.
Not today, thank you.
Was good about Spearhead from Space. It's almost a remake of Spearhead from Space.
Yes,
it's a very similar.
It's very
story,
similar. Yes,
but it's
absolutely.
Everything's amped up. In Spearhead from Space, you had killer store dummies, and in Terror from the Autons, it's just they
killer
go
clowns.
over the top. Killer clowns, you got killer daffodils,
and actually not
got
dissimilar
killer policemen
to like the robot Santa Clauses they had in Christmas Invasion. It's got that same kind of
and I just think that it's just so much. The only thing I don't like about it is the use of CSO.
Well, I mean, this is still an. Okay, so this was another product of going colour. Obviously, a year later, so they had a huge leap forward in the possibilities of what kind of special effects they could do on Doctor Who.
CSO was developed for backgrounds for newsreaders.
Yes,
and I think especially in the Barry Letts era, and you know, there's certain special effects.
You can see. I mean, here's the doll.
Troll, the killer. I can understand in a scene like that, but it's you
can see that
CSO living room and a CSO laboratory and a CSO museum.
It was overused in this story, you know, for doing backgrounds that didn't really need it. But yes, on characters like that, you do see this sort of faint blue haze around them. But it was, for its time, it's a new technology. You know,
CSO, there's certain special effects in Doctor Who. You've got to look at it within the context of when it was made. But I think CSO is one of those effects which never, even back in the day when I was watching Doctor Who as a kid, the CSO scenes would come up and they would look, there's certain special effects which now look bad, but it's only because you're looking at it with a modern day eye, but the CSO always looked bad. Now, it was one thing I was thinking the black and white era had over the 70s Doctor Who was they never used CSO.
Okay.
Not that they could have used CSO, but...
And, well, you were talking about Joe Grant. So this is the story that... And she became a fan favourite straight away, though, really, didn't she, as a character?
I just think that, she's just so nice that people can't help but like her. But, I did dislike the idea of having a companion who's just completely thick.
Well, was she thick? I mean, she was just... I think the idea is that she was just young. She's straight out of university, gets a job at UNIT, so she can't be that... she has to have some kind of intelligence. She's just not necessarily... She's not a scientist. I mean, they introduce her. She's not a scientist, but she is a cryptologist and a few other skills. But I guess she sort of falls straight into the sort of classic companion in the way that people would traditionally think of them. She's there to get into trouble, and the Doctor has to be there to save her.
And she's also there to ask the Doctor questions, so the Doctor can explain the situation to the viewer. And there also another new character who's introduced in that story, Mike Yates.
Mike Yates, yes. I mean, this period of Jon Pertwee is the period of probably having the biggest entourage around the Doctor.
The good thing about it was, with the exception of Joe Grant, they didn't have to be in every story.
No,
it wasn't like
they can pick and choose when they were needed.
Peter Davison had a huge entourage, but this was basically, you didn't have to have Mike Yates or Colonel Franklin, or you didn't have to have the Master in that story necessarily. It was just Joe Grant was the one person who would be with him throughout. So,
I mean, personally, I didn't like this one as much as Spearhead from Space. I think Spearhead from Space holds up more as a story.
I think one of the reasons why, though, Spearhead does also hold up is because the production values still actually hold up now. Because it was all shot on film, all the special effects are in-camera special effects, all on location. I think that way you can feel to it, which is unique throughout Doctor Who's whole history.
But as you were saying, it being a bit more of a remake of Spearhead, they didn't really push forward.
Well, really,
the Auton story.
The Auton and the Nestines are very much in the background. They're basically in this story. They're the Master Stooges. This story is all about introducing and establishing the Master.
And that's really its saving grace. Is that because Roger Delgado is such a great character, extremely charismatic, and he's just got such a wonderful presence and
I
charisma and nobility about him.
I somehow suspect if I had watched Doctor Who at the time, I would have got sick to death of the Master turning up in every story.
Well, of course, this is the first of its season,
Yes.
and he was in the entire season
Yes.
as well.
Watching it as I have done now, you know, when was watching the videos, stories as they're released on video or capturing on UK Gold.
Sure.
That's fine, but I really can see that. But having the Master in one or two stories, especially played by Roger Delgado, and I think it's such a shame.
A bit like Russell T Davies using the Daleks.
Yes. I you want to know something? I'm all for, and I'm devastated that Stephen Moffat said he's not bringing the Daleks back. I want to see the Daleks back every season, but I think it's such a shame. I think that would have been a perfect way to end the Pertwee season.
Yeah.
With the third Doctor having his final confrontation with the Master, and it was a loss to Doctor Who, Roger Delgado's death. But from what the documentaries and what you can see, he was a much loved gentleman, and it just seemed to be just a loss to his friends and family as a whole. It was a terrible tragedy, that.
Okay, so let's have some comments. T. Chalky, Jonathan Pryce did a good homage to Roger Delgado in The Curse of the Fatal Death.
Yes, he did.
Absolutely. Lisa Gifford, Sean was falling out here. Ainley and Joe Grant, jeez. Barry Aldridge, the doll did cause a stir back then.
It did.
And the same with
Mary
Autons
Whitehouse
disguising
had kittens.
And the same with Autons disguising themselves as the police in terror of the Autons.
The Police Federation issued a complaint about it, and Barry Letts apologised, and he actually agreed with them.
Barry Aldridge, I didn't like the Auton voice, a Dalek voice.
Well, I don't think they actually had any voices in Spearhead from Space, but it was in Terror of the Autons. Yes, they did have, and it did sound a bit like a Dalek voice.
So anyway, this wasn't. We didn't have any more Autons throughout any of the other Doctors in the sort of the classic.
They actually tried to bring them back a few times. There was actually a story written by Robert Holmes that was going to be in the aborted season. Season 23. No, season 23.
Yeah.
Which, as you might remember, at the end of season 21. Colin Baker says, and now we're supposed to say we're going off to Blackpool, but they cut his line, and they actually had the scripts written for the first 4 stories of the next season, and they were a week away from starting filming when suddenly
the hiatus.
They put it in this 18-month hiatus, and they actually scrapped all those stories. And I think the first story was going to see the return of the Celestial Toy Maker,
which I did just listen to recently by Big Finish,
and it was actually written by Graham Williams, who was one of the producers of the series. Then there was going to be a new villain for the second story. Then they were going to have Syl teamed up with the Ice Warriors.
Oh yes, fantastic.
And then it was going to be the return of the Autons.
Okay.
And the final story of that season was going to be a Cyberman invasion of Gallifrey.
Oh, that would have been amazing.
And
especially when he goes, excellent.
And the season we got, Trial of the Time Lord. I might get in trouble for saying this, but I think that was the nadir of Doctor Who for me.
Oh dear. But Robert Holmes did license Auton as a character to some very
there's a lot of stuff like this in the
80s
with the fans creating
fan made. I guess this is the time before YouTube, really.
Yes.
And so the only way you could make fan films was to actually release them on VHS.
But there was a market for it. There was a market through and I didn't see that one. I did see Shakedown.
Yeah.
Which was
the Sontarans. I saw that one. Yeah.
And Downtime, which was the return of the Great Intelligence. No, Downtime was the Great Intelligence and the Yeti.
Oh, okay, yeah. But there were some unit ones as well.
I didn't see those, but those were with just Jonathan Franklin.
But how come these haven't been released on DVD? It's very surprising.
Somebody's probably got to get the rights, I assume. And it also might be because Doctor Who's back. I mean, for a start, the Autons, they're back on the new series, so there might be an issue there.
And of course, they did come back as well during the very first story of the relaunch, Rose, way back in 2005. again, I guess it's a way to sort of introduce the new character of Rose and the new Doctor, but putting it in a very, very normal setting. So she works in. She actually works in the.
I think it was also quite clever in that this is something that's quite scary and it really gets off what Doctor Who is about. Good scares for the kids, but at the same time, it's introducing a old classic foe. So it's something to hook new viewers in. But all the old Doctor Who fans, it was like, we're still going to have bits from the Doctor Who history on this, so they don't feel... Or somebody's actually put in the title, thanks to T. Chalky, who's reminding me the title of the return of the Autons in season 23 was supposed to be Yellow Fever.
Okay.
And it was going to be shot in Singapore.
Have they done this one on Big Finish then?
I don't think they've done it on Big Finish, but I don't even think they actually released the book of it either. So somebody might correct me on this, but
because I did listen to the Nightmare Fair, which was the Celestial Toymaker one, where the Doctor goes to Blackpool.
Yeah.
And actually, it was the first one I've actually listened to of the Big Finish stories, and it's kind of fun actually.
Yeah.
Colin Baker does a great turn as just going back to being the Doctor, and he actually sounds almost exactly the same. Nicola Bryant, her accent has changed. It's not quite as American sounding as she was back then.
Not that she was even American back then.
But yeah, they're a lot of fun. Of course, we've had Auton Mickey as well.
Yeah.
And Auton Rory, which I wonder if...
It's a bit confusing, that.
I wonder...
Especially as he had memories of it in a few episodes.
And of course, yes, well, we'll talk about Rory later as well. But and of course, then they upgraded the whole Nestine, so they weren't like sort of a rubbery monster anymore.
Yeah.
It's now they can do it now as a CGI.
But the thing where Russell T Davies kind of like got the continuity wrong a bit there was when he brought them back. Christopher Eccleston, the Night Doctor, was trying to kill them with anti-plastic, but the Nestine aren't made of plastic.
The Nestine themselves aren't plastic.
They're just an intelligence.
It's just the Autons.
But they have an affinity with plastic,
yes.
So that's why they have humanoid dolls made. Okay, so moving on to Fandorica then. Well, just quickly, just to round it up.
Oh, actually, yeah. Should we just talk quickly about some of the extras?
Mm-hmm. You've got the usual route, and it's great. As per usual, it's a great run of extras. Got a making of both stories. They've actually got some archive footage of Jon Pertwee.
Yes, from the BBV videos.
Yes,
which again was the only in the days before DVD extras.
Yes.
To actually be able to see people talk about the period was to actually buy VHS interviews.
Yes.
And they've managed to get the rights to the Jon Pertwee one, which actually has been cut up and used on several different DVD extras now. But there's a great documentary I really was quite fascinated by is actually the leap that BBC made between black and white to colour. And even though they talk specifically about Doctor Who, it's also more generic about the technology.
So somebody's just actually put here in just a nice bit of Doctor Who stuff for you. Somebody's actually put Chalky again. Thank you for this. He's put some details about the return of the Autons I was talking about for season 23.
Yeah.
It was going to be scripted by Robert Holmes. The stories was to run for 3 45-minute episodes. It was going to take place in Singapore and was also to feature the Master, the Rani and the Brigadier on holiday in Singapore.
Well, that could potentially have been the best story ever made.
But Robert Holmes didn't get around to actually writing the scripts. It was done as a story outline.
Right. Okay.
And then the axe kind of fell at that point, which might be why. And as Robert Holmes died 2 years later, that might be why there's never been a book of it. Or like there has been of.
Anyway, so yes, Fanoptica. This is our section for fan-related things that we find. Radio Free Skaro is our podcast of the week. It's 3 guys from Canada, Warren, Stephen and Chris. Very knowledgeable. They know a lot about Doctor Who, but they seem to have photographic memories of very sort of bizarre facts and figures from anything that's ever happened in Doctor Who. And so they can just, in the middle of one discussion, they sort of bring out like someone's costume from The Smugglers or... it's that kind of recall. Very, very, very precise recall. They do get obsessed a bit with stats, like ratings. it's very odd listening to 3 Canadians talking about 5.7 million people watched Doctor Who on BBC One in the UK, and comparing it to the 5.65 who may have watched it the week before. But other than that, their knowledge is vast. They're a lot of fun, very very funny guys to listen to. Quite spoilery, so don't watch if you don't like listening to potential spoilers or listening. And and it's probably not for your casual fan, but it is definitely a podcast for the hardcore fan. So radiofreescaro.com is my shout out to them. As you know, I was we were both at MCM Expo. If you're watching those video guys earlier, and I spotted a silent. But I
saw a lot. I saw an awful lot of women
dressed up as
Matthew Smith with
their
fezzes on.
Yes. Ah, interesting. And the other costume, we've been sent a photo. If you remember, if anyone's watched a vampire web series called Blood and Bone China, here's the lead actor, Anthony Miles.
In his TARDIS.
I think he's now got a Facebook group saying Anthony Miles for the 12th Doctor. So you can join that Facebook group and support him.
Poor people trying to get Matt Smith out already. He's only just started.
So anyway, that's our Fandorica for this week.
Okay,
now,
so if you are from America or Australia, if you're tuning in anywhere from outside the world, you don't want spoilers.
If you haven't yet watched the Almost People,
watch any further. But if you accept there's going to be spoilers, fine. But otherwise, turn off your YouTube or your Ustream or whatever, and cover your ears. But we're going to be talking about the Almost People.
And here's a clip.
Rory and Amy, they may not trust both of us. You're thinking what I'm thinking? Inevitably. I'm glad we're on the same wavelength. See, great minds. Exactly. So, what's the plan? Well, save them all, humans and gangers, to an order. Sounds wonderful. Is that what you were thinking? Yes, it's just so inspiring to hear me say it.
Doctor, come on!
So, what now, Doctor? Well, time to get cracking, Doctor. Hello! Sorry, but we had to establish a few... Protocol.
This was classic stuff, in my opinion. Absolutely classic Doctor Who stuff.
The 2 Doctors. But the 2 Doctors in a very different way than we've seen the 2 Doctors before.
It was hysterical. I mean, I thought Matthew Smith held it fantastically on that.
Now, there's definitely a theme running in Stephen Moffat's era of clones and doubles and more than one version of anyone else. And there's since he first started with the Auton Rory. It's and so we've got 2 Doctors who think alike, sound alike, and act alike.
Yes. But what I enjoyed about this was it was very classic Doctor Who stuff, an Under Siege story, but with a twist in which you have the humans under siege, but the aliens who are putting them under siege are themselves in a way under siege because they're facing death themselves. So it's like nobody's really it's scary, but nobody's really the bad guy here.
Yeah, no, it is. It's sort of an interesting thing that when Doctor Who wants to do sort of a morality tale.
Yeah.
And we did have some tweets in the week, and it was at ATSM podcast. His tweet was really he saw it as an allegory of racism.
We could definitely see an allegory of racism in there potentially.
Do you think the story I mean, setting aside the actual big conclusion, the actual conclusion of the Rebel Flesh story,
I would actually say I felt that right up until their escape, it all went perfectly. And then suddenly you had this kind of like coda to the story in which, the Doctor returns them back to their homes and they reveal what's been going on with the gangers. And this is all very quickly wedged in between the big next episode cliffhanger and, their escape. And I really felt the episode needed probably about another 5 minutes really too. And I felt the resolution of them revealing about what's been happening with the gangers and them just walking into a press conference was a bit of a cop-out.
Yeah, really. No, sure. I mean, it was very interesting in that not all the humans survived, not all the gangers survived.
Yeah, but I
but
thought
everybody
it was a bit too twee in that nobody's duplicate. There was no duplicates. There was no, you know,
Yes.
it was either the human died and the ganger survived, or the ganger died and the human survived. But it was no, both of them died.
And after everyone,
no, you know,
and after everyone was trying to survive, people were then very easily wanting to sacrifice themselves.
Yes.
It's like you're trying to live, and then suddenly say, "Well, I'll just die. That's fine."
Well, it was actually the one human guy who didn't really seem to need to sacrifice himself. I mean, I don't know, did I miss something? But when he shuts the door, why did he have to close himself off?
He did, yes. I don't know. Yes, maybe he didn't. I don't know.
He was just like, he's something. Well, you know, I thought I was going to have something. You know, might as well sacrifice myself. It was a bit frustrating, that.
I'm sure this is probably not the last we will see of gangers as a type of character. I think we will see them
back, because they definitely, that look that they had and the makeup effects, this really iconic Doctor
But also, I think they established in part 1 of the story that there are millions of gangers being used as slave labour.
It was actually established in the second episode that there's 10 million gangers being used in India.
Yeah.
They're a bit like, almost, I felt it was like they were an early version of the Ood, and I felt there was very strong similarities between this story and the Ood story.
It's kind of interesting to see where human history, or well, it's not really history, but it's history from their point of view, because the Doctor obviously seems to know something about gangers and the way, you know, obviously we find out in the very last scene why he decided to go to this island. There was a particular reason, but he's also seemed to be aware of how gangers fit into human history. You know, there's that, what I think I mentioned last week, that sort of Sylvester McCoy aspect of him, where he knows something that he can't tell the humans.
Yes. Or this kind of like idea where everything's on, a bit like with Sylvester McCoy, there's a bigger scheme going on.
There's a bigger scheme,
and he's pulling the strings, but he's not exactly letting on until later on that he has been pulling the strings here. What
let this story down a bit was, I thought some of the CGI was pretty hokey. There's the scene where the Jennifer.
Well, I'll agree it was hokey. It wasn't on screen. I felt long. It was just literally a couple of flashes.
But the pile of dead gangers was very flat looking. It was not good CGI. It didn't look like a pile. It just looked like a computerized block of what a CGI interpretation of a gang of. And then when, you know, in that photo I just showed of her stretching her head, looks very sort of cheap Photoshop. You know, it wasn't very convincing until, of course, they turn into a full creature, and then of course full creature you can do whatever you want, and it looked a bit better at that point. But yeah, I think they were sort of somehow blowing. Either they're saving their CGI budget, or they saved
it for the next episode.
Probably saving it for the next episode. Yeah. But overall, I mean, this was a great story. I mean, a 2-part story. It started well.
I felt it worked very well.
It worked very well.
I felt it was very well paced.
Acting was great. The scenes where the ganger father having to realise that he has to connect with the child. Even though in himself he knows he's not the real person, but he has the memories of the real father. And he has to sort of take, that's sort of, you kind of think, wow, that's kind of a big undertaking, because he has that knowledge in his head, but he now has to pretend he doesn't. So those sort of moments of human interest stories, really. Any fans in the chat room then? The look reminded me of Odo from DS9 from Teacher.
It did actually. I thought about that when I saw the first episode.
So yes, and then of course we have the big ending. The Pond, herself is actually not Amy Pond, and we've actually had another character in the TARDIS this whole time.
How long, how many episodes do you think this is supposedly a?
Well, he seemed to indicate it had been a very long time. I would imagine, because she's been seeing this person. This sort of psychic connection with.
I almost got the impression though that when he just basically the flesh was destroyed on this duplicate of Amy Pond, and we then cut to Amy wherever she is being held. I got the impression that this ganger version of her had her conscious in it, as if she was this prison cell or wherever she's being kept. but she was somehow controlling her other form without realising it, which
Right.
was why she kept on seeing the lady with the eye patch every time she was checking in on her. That was, you know, a crossing in.
There's some sort of psychic connection between Amy and her ganger.
Yeah.
But the ganger is obviously there.
It's obviously there to mislead the Doctor and Rory while they're getting up to their own plans.
But the ganger believes that she's Amy. So
I don't think the ganger has any. I believe the ganger is like a shell, and that's Amy controlling her without actually realising she's in this prison cell or whatever. That's her.
Right. Okay. I see what you mean. Yeah. No, it's interesting, and of course, you know, she's been seeing the famous eye patch lady since the very beginning of this season.
So that's got to be so long as she's been.
So this entire season has been with a ganger Amy, really.
Yeah.
And then maybe the clue is Rory in the Roman suit, because the last time we saw him was in the Christmas Story.
Yes.
Wearing the Roman outfit in their little sex game.
Yeah.
In the honeymoon suite of the. And maybe that's the clue. Maybe that's the point. Where Amy is actually abducted, is actually during their honeymoon. Of course, that would explain why she's pregnant as well. Maybe it is. Maybe it is actually Rory's child.
I would assume it's got to be Rory's child.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to really add some complications you wouldn't normally get on a family TV show. But it's supposed to be a game-changing episode.
Yes.
This is going to apparently have the biggest cliffhanger ever in Doctor Who.
They didn't have the next time on Doctor Who,
but there's been clips all over.
But they have put it on the internet. It's now on BBC One, so we're not spoiling anything by showing you that.
This is the day he finds out who I am.
My friend, you have never risen higher.
On this day, in this place, the Doctor will fall. Where is my wife? Child, not a weapon!
She will be.
Doctor Who.
So I think it's going to be exciting stuff. There's they have revealed several other. It's not just the Cybermen. Don't know if anyone else wants to know, but not everyone actually does. You know, it has been on the BBC's website, Doctor Who, but not everyone does know the full extent of how many different returning characters we have. Obviously, we do know River Song's coming back.
Yeah.
And of course, she does hint that we're going to find out who she really is. But I'm a bit sceptical. I'm not quite sure that we really will. It seems a bit early. It seems a bit early in the relationship between her and the Doctor to really know who she is.
I don't know though. She's been around for what now? It's coming up to 3 years. So you know you've got to give some more information, as it were. So you can't just be constantly teasing. You've got to give something out.
But obviously, again, this is another theory that I had with the Cyberman and Rory and some of the other characters that they've announced. That somehow there might be a sort of
back to Pandorica.
Going back to Pandorica, whether or not, but you know,
I'm even wondering. I've been wondering. I could be proved right. This isn't spoilers. This is speculation. But I'm wondering if the Sontarans and the Cybermen and the Silurians will be bad guys in this, or whether the Doctor's actually going to be needing to recruit some help to save Amy.
Well, yes, that would be interesting, but I'm not quite sure that Cybermen would want to work with him.
if reason, that would also explain why the Daleks aren't around, because there'd be no way he could talk the Daleks into.
I'm sure he can talk Silurians around, because
Silurians are like what I said about the Ice Warriors. They're a race. They're not an evil race.
No,
you know, there's good and there's evil within them. The Sontarans, you just got to tell them there's going to be a good battle, and the Cybermen, you just got to explain there's a logical.
Well, the BBC throughout the series have been releasing prequels, which aren't precursors